There is a facility on Saudi Arabia's Gulf Coast, 64 kilometers north of Dhahran, visible from satellite as a dense cluster of refinery towers and export terminals stretching along the waterfront, that the entire global oil market has spent the past 72 hours treating as an untouchable red line, not because anyone said it was off limits, because everyone assumed it was too important to hit, too consequential, too deeply embedded in the architecture of the global energy system for Iran to strike, because striking it would mean the economic war had become total. This morning, Iran struck it. Aramco halted operations at Saudi Arabia's largest refinery at Ras Tanura on the Persian Gulf Coast after a drone strike in the area, according to people familiar with the matter. Gas oil futures jumped on news of the closure of the refinery that's a key supplier of diesel. Ras Tanura, shut down. 550,000 barrels per day of refining capacity, halted. The export terminal that ships Saudi crude to China, Japan, South Korea, and Europe, halted. The facility that processes 40% of Saudi Arabia's domestic fuel needs, halted. And the Brent crude price that was already heading toward $80 per barrel surged another 10% the moment Bloomberg's headline hit the wire. Because every oil trader on Earth understood in the same instant what that drone strike means, Iran is not targeting military infrastructure anymore. Iran is targeting the energy infrastructure that the entire global economy depends on. The attack on Ras Tanura would mark the first Iranian strike on the Gulf's energy infrastructure. The eastern province contains a dense concentration of upstream infrastructure, including refineries, pipelines, and processing centers for crude and gas. The first Iranian strike on Gulf energy infrastructure. That phrase, published by The National in Abu Dhabi, a newspaper that operates under the oversight of the UAE government, whose own city is also under attack, marks the crossing of the final category line in this war. Iran struck military bases on Saturday. It struck civilian buildings and hotel zones on Sunday. And on Monday morning, it struck the economic engine of the country that produces more oil than any other on Earth, and whose crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman, spent the past 3 years positioning Saudi Arabia as the neutral power broker of the Middle East, the country above the conflict, the destination for investment and vision and modernity. For almost 3 days, there was little sign of a new war raging in the Gulf if you were based in Saudi Arabia. Most schools were business as usual on Monday morning. Saudis and foreigners reported heading to the office and carrying on with meetings, and flights continue to shuffle people into, out of, and across the country. That has the potential to change, and quickly. Business as usual on Monday morning. Schools open, flights operating. The Saudi government's extraordinary management of domestic normalcy, projecting calm while its territory was being struck, lasted exactly until the drone found Ras Tanura. The moment that smoke rose over the world's most important oil export terminal, every calculation Saudi Arabia had made about staying above the conflict, refusing to officially participate while allowing American jets to use its bases for refueling. Condemning Iran's attacks while not joining the American operation, all of it collapsed into a single question that Mohammed bin Salman is now being asked by his own population and his own oil ministry. What do we do now? But Ras Tanura is not even the development that will define the week ahead. The development that will define the week ahead happened at 1:05 a.m. local time on the northern Israeli border, when sirens started sounding in Haifa for reasons that had nothing to do with Iran. Rockets and drones launched from Lebanon set sirens blaring across northern Israel in the early hours of Monday, as the Hezbollah terror group entered the fray to assist its backer, Iran, with its relentless attacks against the Jewish state. The terror group's attacks, which it said were in retaliation for the killing of Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, were met with immediate fury from Israel and waves of airstrikes across Lebanon, including in the capital Beirut. Hezbollah has entered the war. The red line that was supposed to determine whether this conflict became a regional catastrophe or a bounded military operation. The red line that Hezbollah drew publicly 6 weeks ago when it said any attack on Khamenei triggers full authority to take whatever measures it deems appropriate by any means. That red line was crossed when Khamenei died on Saturday morning. Hezbollah waited 48 hours, and then it fired. And now Israel is bombing Beirut, and Lebanon, which spent 3 years rebuilding from the 2024 war, is being bombed again. And the IDF is saying its new offensive against Hezbollah will last several days, and may include a ground invasion. The war that was supposed to last 4 to 5 days is now a three-front conflict: Iran, Lebanon, and the Gulf energy infrastructure, on day 3. The source document for today's video identifies a number that every Western outlet has been treating as a talking point, but that is, in operational terms, the most consequential military fact about this conflict as it enters day 3. The Pentagon told Trump, "End this war as fast as possible. Our missiles are running out." Iran launched new missile and drone strikes on Israel and Gulf states on Monday, the third day of conflict, as oil futures jumped higher on news of a drone strike on Saudi Arabia's biggest oil refinery. Iran's military also reported firing on a U.S. embassy in Kuwait. The Pentagon reportedly told Trump to bring the war to a quick end as soon as possible because the United States is running low on missiles. Running low on missiles. The Pentagon, the institution that manages the world's largest military budget, that has spent decades and hundreds of billions of dollars building the most sophisticated missile defense and strike architecture in human history, told the President of the United States on day 3 of his war to end it fast because the missiles are running out. Not that supplies are below optimal levels, not that replenishment timelines are concerning. Running low. The specific language of a logistics crisis that has arrived faster than any planning document projected. Because Iran's doctrine, slow drones that force Patriot batteries to fire expensive interceptors, followed by ballistic missiles that consume THAAD magazines, followed by hypersonic Fatah-2 weapons that bypass what remains, was specifically designed to deplete American interceptor stocks faster than they can be replenished. This is what General Kane warned about in his classified briefings. This is what the leaked documents about THAAD depletion described. This is why Iran spent 8 months after June 2025 rebuilding its missile arsenal to 2,000 weapons, while America's defense industrial base, which requires 3 to 8 years to replace a single THAAD battery's interceptors, could not keep pace. The attrition mathematics have arrived exactly as designed. Day 3. Pentagon calling Trump. End it fast. Lebanon's state-run news agency, NNA, reported that the Israeli strikes resulted in an initial death toll of 31 people killed and 149 injured. The violence marks a major escalation in what is becoming a regional war between the United States and Israel on one side and Iran and its allies on the other. 31 dead in Lebanon, 149 injured. In the first Israeli airstrike on Beirut since the 2024 war. The war that ended 14 months ago and whose ceasefire Hezbollah violated this morning for the first time because its supreme leader's blood demanded a response. The IDF is now conducting what its chief of staff calls an offensive campaign against Hezbollah that will last several days. Israel's defense minister has named Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem a target for elimination. The same formula applied to Nasrallah, to Haniya, to Khamenei. The assassination doctrine that started this war is now being applied to the next tier of leadership in the next country in the expanding conflict. A drone attacked a Royal Air Force airbase in Cyprus. The British Defence Ministry confirmed to Sky News that its Royal Air Force base in Cyprus has been hit by a suspected drone strike. There were no casualties in the incident at Akrotiri base near Limassol, the British Royal Air Force base at Akrotiri, Cyprus. Inside the European Union, inside a NATO-adjacent country, inside the Mediterranean island where Britain has maintained sovereign base areas since 1960, was struck by a drone on Sunday midnight. Britain is not a party to Operation Epic Fury. Britain told the world it was not in this war. Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer approved American use of British bases to strike Iranian missile launchers, and within hours of that approval being reported, a drone found RAF Akrotiri. Cyprus issued shelter alerts to residents near the base. The EU is now inside the attack perimeter. The drone strike on Ras Tanura added to a wave of Iranian attacks across the Gulf, including strikes on Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Doha, Manama, and Oman's commercial port of Duqm. The strikes have paralyzed major shipping hubs in the United Arab Emirates and Oman. So far, Iranian strikes have hit Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. 8 countries. Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, plus Israel, plus Lebanon, plus Cyprus. That is 11 territories struck by Iranian drones and missiles in 72 hours. Iran is doing this alone, without Hezbollah's full arsenal committed, without the Houthis operating at maximum capacity, without China or Russia providing material military support. Alone, Iran has struck 11 territories, shut down the world's most important oil refinery, mined the Strait of Hormuz, sunk or damaged multiple tankers, hit the U.S. Embassy compound in Kuwait, fired on the Abraham Lincoln, and depleted America's interceptor stocks to the level where the Pentagon is calling the president and telling him to end the war fast. There's a comparison being made in every newsroom, every parliament, every bank trading floor, and every military operations center on Earth this Monday morning. And the comparison is doing more damage to American credibility than any missile or drone that has yet been fired. The comparison is this. In 12 days of fighting in June 2025, Israel suffered damage that it managed, contained, and survived. In 72 hours of fighting in March 2026, Israel is reporting hospitals at capacity, defense systems depleted, Beit Shemesh destroyed by a ballistic missile that killed 9 people, including a mother and her volunteer emergency responder daughter, Hezbollah rockets incoming from Lebanon again, and the IDF launching what it calls a broad and comprehensive offensive that may include a ground invasion of Lebanon, the 4th Israeli ground operation in Lebanon in 40 years. Mother and daughter, Sarah and Ronit Elimelech and Oren Katz, are identified as 3 of the 9 people killed when an Iranian ballistic missile struck the city of Beit Shemesh earlier today. The municipality names the 3 victims, all residents of the city. In a statement made hours after the strike, which also destroyed a synagogue and wounded some 50 people, 2 of Ronit's children were rescued from the rubble. Sarah and Renit Elimelech, a mother and daughter, killed in a synagogue in Beit Shemesh by an Iranian ballistic missile that the Iron Dome did not intercept, that the David Sling did not intercept, that the Arrow system did not intercept. On the 3rd day of a war that Netanyahu said would be decisive, that Trump said was ahead of schedule, and that the Pentagon is now telling Trump to end fast because the missiles are running out. 2 of Ronit's children were pulled from the rubble of the synagogue alive. Their mother did not survive. Hezbollah pledges to continue its jihad and resistance and to stand firmly and steadfastly alongside the Islamic Republic to defeat the arrogant and tyrannical aggressors until the final and complete victory is achieved. Until the final and complete victory is achieved. That is not the language of an organization calculating its exposure. It is the language of an organization that has made a decision whose costs Lebanon will pay, whose consequences Beirut's rebuilt neighborhoods are experiencing right now as Israeli jets strike Dahieh again for the 4th time in 3 years. Hezbollah has entered the war. The ceasefire that lasted 14 months, the ceasefire built on American diplomacy, on the Lebanese army's gradual strengthening, on the Lebanese government's careful neutrality, lasted until Khamenei died. Now it is over. And Lebanon, which had nothing to do with Operation Epic Fury, which did not host American jets, which did not provide basing rights, which pleaded publicly for Hezbollah to stay out, is burning again. Germany said, considering joining Israel-U.S. campaign against Iran. Germany is considering joining the campaign. The country that spent the entire post-World War II era building a foreign policy identity around the phrase never again war, never again unilateral force, never again military adventurism outside the strictest multilateral frameworks, is now debating whether to join an American-Israeli military operation against Iran that the UN Secretary General called a squandering of diplomacy, that the Omani foreign minister begged America not to pursue, that killed 108 girls in an elementary school in Manab, and that has now produced Israeli airstrikes on Beirut for the 4th time in a decade. The geometry of this war is expanding in every direction simultaneously. Iran hit 11 territories. Hezbollah opened a northern front. Saudi Aramco is shut. Ras Tanura is dark. Brent is up 10%. The Pentagon says missiles are running low. The IDF says its Hezbollah campaign will last several days. Lebanon is burning again. And Trump, the man who planned a 4 to 5 day operation designed to produce regime change before Monday's market open, is watching a stock market that opened Monday to a war with no exit, no ceasefire, no regime collapse, and no end in sight. Brent crude futures surged roughly 10% on Monday following the drone strike and the wider wave of attacks across the Gulf. Saudi Arabia's heavily fortified energy facilities have been targeted previously, most notably in September 2019, when unprecedented drone and missile attacks on the Abqaiq and Khurais plants temporarily knocked out more than half of the kingdom's crude production and roiled global markets. September 2019, Abqaiq and Khurais. The attack that temporarily knocked out half of Saudi Arabia's crude production and roiled global markets was a warning. Iran fired it and watched the world panic for 2 weeks before prices stabilized. Today, Iran hit Ras Tanura. This is not a warning. This is the war that 2019 was the rehearsal for, and Ras Tanura is shut, and Hezbollah is firing, and Lebanon is burning, and the Pentagon says end it fast, and the missiles are running out. Share this video to every contact you have right now. Saudi Aramco's Ras Tanura is shut, 550,000 barrels per day, halted. Hezbollah has entered the war for the first time since the 2024 ceasefire. The RAF base in Cyprus has been hit. The Pentagon told Trump to end the war fast. The missiles are running low. Brent crude is up 10%, and Lebanon is burning again.